At 8:20 p.m. on a Tuesday, the Earth stops. 1 second later, it starts again. Both events release the same energy. Neither is survivable. 1 second. That is the entire duration of the scenario. 1 second of stillness, bracketed by two torque events that each dump 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules into the planet's crust. Two catastrophes, not one. The arithmetic is symmetric, and the arithmetic is the whole story. 1 second. 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules. Twice. A single second. Two identical catastrophes. The crust partially melts on the way down and partially melts again on the way back up. This is the arithmetic of a 1 second pause, and it is why no physicist takes the "and then everything resumes" version seriously. Here is the ledger. The rotational kinetic energy of the Earth is approximately 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules. To stop the planet, that energy has to leave. To restart it, that same energy has to return. Conservation of angular momentum is not a suggestion. It is a bill, and the planet pays it twice. In units a human can hold, that is roughly 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs, released as heat, then released again 1 second later in the opposite direction. The same bomb count, the same crust, the same thin film of rock between us and the mantle. Before the stop, consider the motion. At the equator, the Earth's surface travels at roughly 1,670 kilometers per hour, about 465 meters per second. Faster than a rifle bullet sustained for your entire life, and you have never felt it. The speed depends on latitude. The formula is simple. Velocity equals angular velocity times radius times the cosine of latitude. At 60 degrees north, Oslo, St. Petersburg, the southern tip of Greenland, the ground moves at about 837 kilometers per hour, half the equatorial figure, still 232 meters per second, still faster than any hurricane on record. The planet is not a perfect sphere. Centrifugal force over 4.5 billion years has pushed the equator outward by roughly 21 kilometers. The WGS-84 ellipsoid is the shape of a world in rotational equilibrium. Remove the rotation and the shape itself is no longer stable. A reflex objection arrives here. Newton's first law, if everything is moving together, nothing feels it. True. Horizontal inertia does not care about your feet. That is exactly the problem. When the ground stops and you do not, the difference between the two velocities becomes the weapon. At t equals 0, the torque arrives. The crust decelerates from 465 meters per second to 0 at the equator in 1 second. The energy has to go somewhere. Energy always goes somewhere. 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules. Dumped. Into friction at tectonic boundaries. Into shear between crust and mantle. Into the brittle upper lithosphere, which responds the way any solid responds to that much heat per unit volume. It partially melts, not symbolically, not metaphorically, partially. The crust is roughly 30 kilometers thick on continents 7 under the oceans. A fraction of that mass crosses the solidus temperature and becomes melt. The rest fractures along every pre-existing fault the planet has accumulated since the Hadean. 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs distributed across the volume of the lithosphere in 1 second. That is the receipt. Every coastline, every mountain range, every continental shelf is simultaneously deformed by a heat pulse with no historical analog. A contrarian framing circulates online. The stop causes supersonic winds that scour the surface. It does not. Not within 1 second. The atmosphere couples to the surface through viscous drag, and that coupling has an E-folding timescale of days to weeks, not seconds. The air, like your coffee cup, keeps moving. But the catastrophe at t equals 0 is not atmospheric. It is solid Earth shear, and it is everything unattached to the ground continuing eastward at near half a kilometer per second. Between t equals 0 and t equals 1, there is a frame of apparent stillness. The ground is not moving. Almost nothing else got the memo. The geodynamo does not collapse. The Earth's magnetic field is generated by convection in the liquid outer core, and its characteristic decay time, in the absence of new dynamo action, is measured in thousands of years. 1 second does nothing to it. The compass still works. The field is the one thing that survives the dead second intact. The oceans do not migrate. Water has inertia and viscosity. Bulk redistribution of the sea surface from equatorial bulge to spherical equilibrium takes hours to days, not seconds. The tide you see at t equals 0.5 is roughly the tide you saw at t equals minus 0.5. The things that do move are the things that were never bolted to the crust. A cyclist in Quito retains 465 meters per second of eastward velocity. A commuter train in Oslo retains 232 meters per second. An airliner at cruise retains its airspeed plus the ground it was riding. The survival map for that 1 second is a cosine function of latitude. The poles are almost still. The tropics are a shooting gallery. At t equals 1 second, the scenario says the Earth starts again. This is where most treatments of the question end. Physics does not end here. To restore the angular velocity, the same torque has to be applied with the opposite sign. To re-inject 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules of rotational kinetic energy into the crust, some agent has to push the planet eastward as hard as it was just pushed westward. The energy bill is symmetric. The arithmetic is non-negotiable. The crust partially melts again. The same lithospheric volume that absorbed 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs in deceleration now absorbs 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs in acceleration. The faults that fractured on the way down fracture again on the way up. The melt pools that formed at t equals 0 are reheated at t equals 1. The ledger closes. Total energy dissipated across the 1 second event, roughly 4.3 times 10 to the 29th joules, 2 times 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs. The scenario is not a pause. It is a symmetric double detonation of the entire planet's kinetic budget, delivered through the crust in 2 equal pulses 1 second apart. This is the second act climax the reference videos omit. A stop is a catastrophe. A stop followed by a restart is the same catastrophe, administered twice, to a crust that has not had time to cool between doses. The restart is not a reset button. It is the second apocalypse. And it is the honest half of the question. If the Earth stops for 1 second and then resumes, the resumption is not a gift. It is a second bill, priced identically to the first. A reasonable objection: this is a thought experiment. The scenario is underspecified. No mechanism is given for the stop, and no mechanism is given for the restart. Why insist on the energy bill? Because conservation laws do not care whether the scenario is a thought experiment. They care about the initial and final states. Initial state: rotating Earth with 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules of rotational kinetic energy. Intermediate state: stationary Earth, 0 joules. Final state: rotating Earth again. The energy has to leave and it has to return. The path is unspecified. The total is not. Change the deceleration profile and the conclusion survives. Stop instantaneously and the energy dumps in a delta function. Stop gradually across the full 1 second and the energy dumps across 1 second. The peak heat flux differs. The integrated heat does not. Either profile melts crust. Both profiles do it twice. This is why the scenario is serious even when it is silly. You can argue about the agent, the duration, the deceleration curve. You cannot argue with the ledger. Every self-consistent specification of Earth stops for 1 second and then resumes ends in partial crustal melt on both ends for a total energy release equal to roughly 2 times 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs. The math says so. Return to 8:20 p.m. on a Tuesday. 1 second. 2 torque events. 2.14 times 10 to the 29th joules released and then re-injected. 10 to the 13th Hiroshima bombs. Twice. The planet is not punished for stopping. The planet is punished for the arithmetic of stopping and then punished again symmetrically for the arithmetic of starting. Neither event is survivable. Both events are required by the same conservation law. The universe keeps its books. A 1 second pause is a 2-entry ledger and the ledger in the end balances. Next week we open a different one.